The first thing you need to understand about the temple city isn't its grandeur or its impressive architecture. Nah, forget the towering spires that pierce the sky like something out of a space opera. That's all for the tourists and the aliens who think they've stumbled upon the last remnant of human civilization. The real heart of the city is the archives, a labyrinth of dusty shelves filled with the remnants of human culture, and where I, Leora, the so-called archivist, spend my miserable existence. "Leora!" yelled a voice, echoing through the dusty corridors, bouncing off the shelved dreams of long-dead humans. That was Rax, the resident security officer, which was a fancy way of saying he mostly drank coffee and napped. "Got some visitors. And oh boy, you're gonna love this." I rolled my eyes, not even bothering to hide my disdain. Visitors meant aliens, and aliens meant questions, and questions meant my headache was going to get worse before it got better. My head throbbed like a drum beaten by a particularly angry toddler. "Let me guess," I replied, not bothering to look up from the ancient tablet I was pretending to dust. "Another group of wide-eyed aliens who think we're the last bastion of human wisdom." Rax sauntered in, grinning like a cat who'd found an unattended plate of fish. "Better. They've been reading." That got my attention. I put down the brush and gave him my full focus. "Reading what exactly?" he shrugged, too casual for my liking. "You know, just the usual, War and Peace, Sun Tzu, some Star Wars scripts." "Oh, great." I could feel the headache setting up camp behind my eyes, ready for a long stay. "Please tell me they didn't think Yoda was a human military strategist." Rax snorted. "Not yet, but give him time. They're pretty taken with the whole Jedi thing." "Think it's an elite warrior class." I groaned and pinched the bridge of my nose. "So let me get this straight. They think the Jedi are real, and they're interested in our supposed military strategies because, Rax interrupted, leaning against a shelf like he couldn't care less about the impending doom. "They're planning some big galactic war thing and thought they'd consult the experts." "You know us. Fantastic." I could almost feel the sarcasm dripping from my words like oil from a leaky spaceship. "And exactly which species are we dealing with today?" "The Galaxians," he said, doing a poor job of hiding his amusement. "You know, those lumpy green folks with the expressive eye stalks." I sighed. Of course, it had to be the Galaxians. Their idea of diplomacy involved a lot of waving, which was unfortunate given they had 8 limbs and no sense of personal space. "All right, let's get this over with." Rax gestured grandly, as if presenting a spectacle worthy of royal approval. "After you, O wise archivist." The Galaxians were waiting in a poorly lit chamber that smelled faintly of mildew and desperation. Their leader, a particularly excitable specimen named Zog, was waving his eye stalks around like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. "Ah, Archivist Leora," Zog bellowed, his voice echoing painfully against the stone walls. "We are honored by your presence." I forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Zog, the pleasure is all yours. What brings you to our humble repository of human knowledge today?" Zog's eye stalks wiggled with enthusiasm. "We seek advice on your famed warrior class, the Jedi. We have read your historical documents and believe their strategies would be most effective in our upcoming conflict." I gave a sideways glance to Rax, who was doing his best to maintain a neutral expression. "Well," I started, choosing my words with the care of a diplomat trying to defuse a bomb, "the Jedi are indeed a fascinating subject. However, they might not be quite what you think." Zog seemed unfazed. "Ah, modesty, a true mark of a great leader. We expected as much from the progenitors of such advanced tactics." I cleared my throat. "Right. So what exactly are you hoping to learn from the Jedi?" "Their combat techniques, of course," Zog exclaimed, all eye stalks now focused intently on me. "The use of their mystical weaponry, their leadership in battle." I nodded, trying to keep a straight face. "You mean lightsabers and the Force?" "Precisely." Zog's enthusiasm was contagious, though not in a good way. "Imagine our armies equipped with such power." My mind flashed to the ancient films I'd seen, the glowing swords cutting through digital enemies. Well, the thing about lightsabers is, they're not exactly practical, and the Force, well, let's just say it requires a certain belief system. Zog pondered this, his eye stalks twitching thoughtfully. A belief system, I nodded. Yes, a very complex one. It involves a lot of meditation and midichlorians. There was a pause. What are midichlorians? Rax coughed, barely disguising a laugh. Little magic bugs that live in your blood, he said, shrugging. Totally real. Zog seemed to absorb this information with all the seriousness of a general being briefed on troop movements. Fascinating. And how do we acquire these midichlorians? I couldn't help it. The laughter bubbled up before I could stop it. Oh, they're not for sale, I'm afraid. Rax, doing his best to keep a straight face, added, you might want to try some meditation. Lots of it. Zog looked to his companions, who were nodding with solemn understanding. Very well. We shall meditate then and hope the midichlorians find us worthy. I forced a smile, desperately trying to maintain the facade. I'm sure they will, I said, with what I hoped was sincerity. As the Galaxians departed, their limbs waving in what I hoped was a farewell and not a declaration of war, I turned to Rax. You do realize, I said, that we just sent them off to meditate on the Force. He nodded, grinning like a man who just watched someone walk into a glass door. Hey, if it keeps them busy and not pointing lasers at us, I call that a win. I shook my head, the absurdity of it all washing over me. This is going to come back and bite us, isn't it? Rax shrugged. Probably, but that's a problem for future us, right? I couldn't argue with that logic, twisted as it was. Let's just hope they don't stumble upon Game of Thrones and decide dragons are the next big thing. Rax chuckled. Now that would be a bit of a fire hazard. But hey, can't be worse than the last guys who believed Jurassic Park was a guide to genetic engineering. I shuddered at the memory. Yeah, and look how well that turned out. As we walked back into the depths of the archives, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this misunderstanding was just the beginning. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, seemed to enjoy throwing curveballs our way, and I had a sinking suspicion that this one was going to curve right into our faces. But for now, all I could do was laugh at the absurdity of it all, and maybe, just maybe, hope that the Force was with us. The next morning, if you could call it that, in a city where the sky was as much a permanent fixture as the dust in the archives, I found myself staring at the face of yet another alien visitor. This one was different, primarily because they weren't waving their appendages like they were trying to get a spaceship to land. They were standing perfectly still, which was as unnerving as a Galaxian's enthusiasm. Archivist Leora, the new alien said. Its voice was smooth, like a salesman peddling eight-legged home decor. I am Ambassador Xylox from the Aluan Consortium. Ah, Xylox, I replied, sounding less impressed than a cat confronted by a vacuum cleaner. What can I do for you today? Xylox looked around, his eyes. Yes, he had eyes, 4 of them, scanning the dusty shelves. We have encountered an issue of great importance regarding your historical documents. Of course you have, I muttered. Please enlighten me. We recently acquired several of your archived texts, Xylox continued, and we believe there might have been misinterpretations. I leaned back against a shelf, crossing my arms. Let me guess, Jedi, midichlorians, mystical warrior classes, that sort of thing. Xylox's eyes narrowed slightly, though whether in confusion or suspicion was anyone's guess. Precisely. We have been attempting to decipher your strategies, but they seem quite fantastical. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Yeah, welcome to human culture. Our greatest strategies involve fictional scenarios and magical thinking, for fun. Fun? Xylox's voice inflected upwards like he'd never heard of the concept, which, given his species, might actually be true. Yes, fun, I said. Humans like to entertain themselves with stories. They're not real strategies, just entertainment fiction. Xylox's eyes widened, a quartet of perfect OS. So the texts are not a strategic guide, about as strategic as a bedtime story, I replied. But the Galaxian said, "Yeah, about that," I interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. They kind of misunderstood. You know Galaxians, always misplacing their context along with their keys. Xylox looked thoroughly disoriented now. And the Force, metaphor. It's all metaphor. We humans are great at creating elaborate fantasies to distract ourselves from life's more depressing realities. Ah, Xylox seemed to consider this, his eyes blinking in an asynchronous pattern. So we should disregard the teachings of the Jedi. If you want to avoid embarrassing yourself at your next intergalactic strategy meeting, yes, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. Xylox's lanky form seemed to deflate slightly, like a balloon realizing it was in the wrong parade. I see. This is unfortunate. Tell me about it, I muttered. But that's the problem with archives. Everyone thinks they hold the keys to the universe when really they're just full of our dirty laundry. Rax chose that moment to appear, carrying a cup of what I generously assumed was coffee. Hey Xylox, Leora giving the cultural tour, are we? More like damage control, I replied, shooting Rax a look that could strip paint. Xylox turned to Rax, inclining his head. Your historical documents have been misleading. Rax chuckled, taking a sip from his mug. Yeah, we get that a lot. Humans always thinking with more imagination than practicality. Our assessment aligns, Xylox said, his tone as dry as the archives themselves. Great, so we're all on the same page, I said. Let's just keep the fictional stuff where it belongs, okay. But what of the strategies we've already initiated? Xylox asked, a note of panic creeping into his voice. Initiated, I echoed. What exactly did you do? Xylox hesitated, which was never a good sign. We might have recruited our own Jedi forces. Rax burst out laughing, nearly spilling his coffee. You what? Xylox's eyes narrowed again. Is this humorous to you? I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Rax not helping. Sorry, Rax said, though he didn't sound it. I've just got this image in my head of aliens in bathrobes waving around sticks. Xylox looked deeply unimpressed. We took it quite seriously. Okay, let's backtrack, I said, doing my best to regain control of the situation. What exactly did you implement? Xylox's expression gave the impression of someone about to confess to a series of regrettable decisions at a party. We began training squads in the ways of the Jedi as per the texts, meditations, combat training. We even attempted to construct the glow swords, lightsabers. I corrected automatically, then cursed under my breath. I mean, they're not real. You understand that now, right? Xylox blinked slowly, as if processing this new, unwelcome reality. And the meditations, I shrugged helplessly. Look, meditation's great for stress relief, but if you're banking on it for strategic warfare, you might want a plan B. Rax, still grinning, offered, maybe try reading The Art of War instead. It's not as flashy, but it's got some decent ideas. Xylox seemed to consider this as though it was revolutionary information. Perhaps we will. Thank you, Archivist Leora, Security Officer Rax. As Xylox left, I turned to Rax, shaking my head. You realize this is going to cause chaos, right? Chaos? Nah, Rax said, waving a hand dismissively. Just a little interstellar slapstick. Slapstick with armies, I pointed out. Hey, every good comedy needs a few explosions, Rax said with a wink. You're impossible, I muttered. That's why you keep me around, he replied, raising his mug in a mock toast. I watched Xylox disappear down the corridor, feeling a mix of relief and impending doom. The Aeluan Consortium was powerful, and if their idea of strategy was now influenced by Jedi mind tricks, we might have just tipped the balance in a way no one expected. Think they'll manage? Rax asked, breaking the silence. Honestly, no, I admitted. But it might make for an interesting chapter in the archives one day. Rax laughed. Imagine the footnotes. In this year, the Aeluans attempted to harness the power of fictional characters, resulting in a diplomatic incident of hilarity. I shook my head, unable to stop the smile forming. Just another day at the archives, right? Right, he agreed, clinking his mug against an imaginary glass. To the archives and all the fictional warriors in between. The day trudged on, as days are wont to do when you're buried beneath the weight of other people's histories. I found myself distracted, wondering how long it would take for Xylox's Jedi forces to realize they'd been duped, and what that realization would mean for Temple City. "Think we should warn anyone?" Rax asked, breaking into my thoughts. "About the impending fiasco?" I asked. "Nah, let them find out the hard way builds character," Rax snorted. "Look at you spreading joy and wisdom. It's a gift," I said dryly. "Besides, we're the archivists. Our job is to preserve history, not fix it." "True," Rax admitted. "But it sure makes for a good story." I gave him a sidelong glance. "Maybe someday it will be. If we live long enough to write it." Rax just laughed, that easy laugh of his, the kind that made you believe everything might turn out fine, even when you knew better. "Here's hoping the Force is with us." "Yeah," I said, watching the dust settle once more. "Here's hoping." Life in the archives was predictable, a blend of routine and the occasional visit from those who thought human culture held the keys to the universe. But today had been different, a reminder that even in the vast expanse of space, it was possible to find yourself caught up in the most mundane, ridiculous chaos imaginable. And for better or worse, it was always entertaining. The end. "Damn it to the depths of a Galaxian's belly button," I muttered, pushing aside a stack of ancient media containing human historical records like sci-fi classics of the 20th and 21st centuries. The aliens were apparently hell-bent on transforming fiction into fact, and it was my job to stop it before they accidentally declared war with laser swords that didn't bloody well exist. Rax, ever the epitome of uselessness with a caffeine addiction, slouched into the room, his mug steaming like it was trying to obscure his face from responsibility. "Heard you shouting. Everything's still a dumpster fire." I rolled my eyes. "More like a citywide blaze. Our alien friends are hell-bent on recreating Star Wars as a tactical manual." Rax chuckled, a sound as comforting as a malfunctioning airlock. "Gotta hand it to them, they're committed." "Yeah, committed to their own alien asylum," I retorted. "Which is why I need Jaxel." "Jaxel?" Rax's eyebrows shot up so high they might have needed clearance to land. "The engineer, what's he going to do? Build them a better delusion." "He's going to help explain why glow sticks aren't weapons," I said, brushing past. Jaxel's workshop was tucked away in the deepest bowels of the archives, far from sanity, close to genius, and littered with machinery that might have had minds of their own. I found him bent over a contraption that looked like a toaster having an identity crisis. "Jaxel," I called, trying not to trip over a stray wire that seemed to have ambitions of being a tripwire. "Leora." He looked up, a magnifying glass strapped to one eye making him look like a mad scientist on a budget. "What brings you to my lair of lost causes and badly soldered dreams?" "I need your help with the aliens," I said. "They're taking Star Wars a bit too literally." Jaxel snorted, which I took as a sign he was still sane. Not the first time someone's misunderstood human culture. "Remember when the Galaxians thought the Terminator was a documentary on human evolution?" "Yeah, and we nearly had to explain why robots wouldn't actually rise to kill us," I sighed. "This time, though, it's more serious. They've started training Jedi." Jaxel's eyebrows launched a reconnaissance mission into his hairline. "Oh boy, the Force is strong with those idiots." "Exactly," I said. "I need you to help me decode this mess and explain it to them in a way that won't result in interstellar incidents." Jaxel grinned, a wicked gleam in his eye. "This could be fun. Let's play intergalactic educator." With remarkable speed and a few muttered curses, Jaxel gathered a collection of human contraptions he insisted would aid in our diplomatic mission. Among them, an ancient DVD player, a collection of classic films, and a model lightsaber he'd built for a school project years ago. "Why do you even have that?" I asked, pointing at the plastic saber. "Insurance," he replied with a shrug, "in case anyone questions my allegiance to the Force." Together, we made our way to the alien embassy, where Ambassador Xylox awaited us with all the cheer of a cat at a bath. His 4 eyes narrowed in what could only be described as skepticism mixed with profound disappointment. Archivist Leora, Engineer Jaxel, Xylox greeted, his voice as smooth as an oil slick in space. I trust you're here to explain why your historical documents are a farce. If by farce you mean entertaining, sure, I replied, gesturing to the equipment we had lugged over. We brought some historical references to help clear things up. Jaxel set up the DVD player with all the ceremony of a magician unveiling a trick. We're going to show you what human culture is really about: entertainment, allegory, and a hefty dose of nonsense. Xylox watched with the kind of expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else, possibly even a black hole without an exit strategy. Very well, he conceded. Proceed with your demonstration. As the opening crawl of A New Hope scrolled across the screen, I couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia. Back when space travel was confined to screens and dreams, and we thought the future would be shiny and perfect. As if. Observe, Jaxel said, pointing with the model lightsaber, which hummed to life with a noise that could only be described as wishful thinking. This is fiction. It's meant for entertainment, not education. Xylox's eyes were glued to the screen, an expression of dawning comprehension slowly replacing the skepticism. So these warriors are not historical figures. No more than Bugs Bunny is a wildlife documentary, I replied dryly. Jaxel continued, it's all about the human desire to escape reality. We create these stories to explore themes, ideas, questions about morality and existence. But they aren't meant to be taken literally. Xylox nodded slowly, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession like a set of malfunctioning traffic lights. So, you're saying that our attempts to emulate these Jedi were misguided? Monumentally, I said, trying to keep the exasperation out of my voice. But understandable, considering how persuasive human fiction can be. Rax chose this moment to saunter in, a fresh mug of coffee in hand. How's the history lesson going? Teach. Enlightening, Xylox said, his voice dripping with an irony that almost made me proud. I now understand the importance of context in your records. Better late than never, Jaxel quipped, shutting down the player with a flourish. So how about we start fresh? We can guide you through actual human history if you're interested. Xylox hesitated, his form slumping slightly as if the weight of his own errors were pressing down on him. Yes, I believe that would be wise. We cannot afford further misunderstandings. Fantastic, Rax said, raising his mug in a mock toast. Here's to avoiding interstellar chaos, and to understanding the difference between history and Hollywood, I added. The Alien ambassador nodded, his expression softening. We will return the texts and await your guidance on the proper interpretation of human history. As Xylox drifted off to inform his superiors of the updated status, that they were not, in fact, about to gain supernatural powers, Jaxel turned to me, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off a prank. Think they'll actually listen this time? He asked. Probably not, I replied, shrugging. But at least we tried, and if nothing else we got a good story out of it, Rax snorted. Story of our lives, huh? Yeah, I said, thinking of the archives and their endless shelves of forgotten dreams and misinterpreted myths. It's what we do best. Jaxel packed up the equipment, pausing to twirl the model lightsaber like a kid with a new toy. So what's next for the archivist and the engineer? More of the same, I imagine, I said, feeling oddly optimistic. Keeping the peace, one misunderstood myth at a time. And drinking, Rax interjected with a grin. Can't forget the drinking. We made our way back to the archives, our steps echoing in the cavernous halls like the whispers of 1,000 forgotten voices. Each echo was a reminder that our past was as much fiction as fact, shaped by the stories we told and the ones we chose to believe. As I watched Rax and Jaxel bicker about the merits of fiction over fact, I realized that human culture was a tapestry of contradictions, as tangled and colorful as the stories we cherished. And maybe, just maybe, that was our greatest strength. So do you think we'll end up in the archives someday? Jaxel asked, his tone light. Only if we do something truly remarkable, I replied, smirking. Like convincing a bunch of aliens to stop trying to become space wizards. Hey, there's still time, Rax said, taking a swig of his coffee. The galaxy's a big place with plenty of room for more screw-ups. True enough, I said, watching the dust settle around us. Here's to the next great adventure. We stood there, surrounded by the remnants of human imagination and the weight of possibility. And somehow, amidst the chaos and confusion, it felt like home. The archives were a flurry of motion, like ants on a sugar binge. The chaos was palpable, and I was beginning to think sanity had packed up and left on the last shuttle. Rax was leaning against the wall, his ever-present mug of coffee warming his hands. "They've started mobilizing," he said, eyes wide with what might have been fear or too much caffeine. "Xylox just informed me. The Alien Council thinks the Empire is real, and they're about to join the Rebel Alliance." "Perfect," I muttered, already feeling a headache the size of a small moon forming. The galaxy's biggest LARP session, and we're caught in the crossfire. Great. Jaxel spun a wrench like a gunslinger with a particularly shiny revolver. "Should we tell them the Empire's a metaphor for fascism and not an actual threat we need to form alliances against?" I snorted. "Sure, and while we're at it, let's explain why Han shot first. We need a plan, and fast." Rax's mug hit the table with a thud that echoed around the room. "I vote for a new planet. Something sunny with no history of space operas." "Tempting," I replied, already rifling through the files in my head. "But unless you've got a spaceship hidden in that mug of yours, we're stuck here." "Jaxel, we're going covert." His eyes lit up like a kid who just found out Christmas came twice this year. "We're going into their archives." "Exactly. We need to find out what other human history they've been misinterpreting. There's got to be a way to convince them to stand down." I paused, considering. "Or at least not aim those glow sticks in our direction." "Right, because nothing says not threatening like a bunch of aliens with lightsaber aspirations," Rax quipped, the sarcasm practically dripping from his lips. "Rax, you're on lookout." "Try not to look conspicuous," I said, but quickly amended, "or, well, more conspicuous than usual." The plan was sketchy at best, suicidal at worst. But in Temple City, that was about as good as it got. We made our way to the Alien Embassy, a stunning piece of architecture that would have been impressive if we weren't about to break into it. Jaxel had brought along a toolkit that looked more like a medieval torture device collection, and I had to hope that whatever the aliens considered high security responded well to tinkering. "Any last words of wisdom?" Jaxel asked as we approached the main door. "Yeah," I said, eyeing the ornate entryway. "If you get caught, blame Rax." Rax shot me a look that was half annoyed, half amused. Somehow I knew this was my fault. Inside, the embassy was a maze of corridors and railings, all designed to make you feel small and insignificant. The archives were deeper in, locked away like the universe's most boring secrets. We needed to get past a few guards, but they were more interested in discussing the finer points of holographic chess than watching for intruders. "Look at them," Jaxel whispered. "So engrossed in their game. Isn't it nice when your work is also your hobby?" "Spare me the commentary," I muttered, sliding past. "Let's just get inside before they decide to switch to guard duty." Jaxel popped the lock with the kind of finesse that suggested his engineering degree had multiple uses. Inside, the Alien archives were a stark contrast to ours, clean, organized, and filled with tablets that glowed with ominous intent. "Right," I said, pulling up a chair. "Let's see what they've got." Jaxel began navigating the system with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for first dates or last orders at the bar. "Okay, here we go. Historical accounts of the human empire, that sounds promising." I leaned over, reading the text with mounting horror. "They've got everything here. Dune, Warhammer 40K, even the bloody Matrix. No wonder they're confused. They think we're a race of intergalactic warlords," Jaxel said, disbelief tinging his voice. "We're going to need more than a history lesson to undo this." "Tell me about it," I said, scrolling through the list. "They've even got Ender's Game. If they think we're training child soldiers, we're screwed. Jaxel chuckled darkly. Well, at least we know where their paranoia comes from. Right, I said, clicking through more entries. We need something that'll resonate. Something to prove we're not all about war. Jaxel paused, finger hovering over a title. What about this? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I laughed despite myself. A book about the futility of life, the universe, and everything. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's worth a shot, he said, beginning the transfer. At this point, we could all use a bit of perspective. The data streamed onto the storage device, slowly but surely. Time was a luxury we didn't have, and I could feel the pressure building. If we didn't succeed, the Alien Council would misinterpret humanity's history in the worst way possible. Come on, I muttered to the sluggish progress bar. I've seen glaciers move faster. Jaxel glanced up from his work, eyebrow arched. Glaciers. Been watching old Earth documentaries again. Just move it, I hissed, eyes darting to the door. Any minute now, those guards could realize they were missing 2 disguised lunatics and a rather conspicuous engineer. Then the transfer finished with a soft chime. Jaxel pocketed the device with a triumphant grin. Got it. Now let's get out of here before they decide to start the next round of holographic chess. We slipped back into the corridors, trying to ignore the pounding of our hearts in our ears. It wasn't until we were halfway out of the building that we realized something was off. Why is it so quiet? I asked under my breath, slowing my pace. That's probably a bad sign, Rax replied, his voice echoing softly. A glance to the side revealed what we'd feared. The guards had abandoned their post. They know, Jaxel muttered, his voice tight with panic. We need to move, I said, urgency giving my words an edge. Now. We ran, the sound of our footfalls like thunder in the silence. We needed to get back to our archives, to decode the information and prepare a presentation that would prevent a disaster. The streets were empty, save for a few stragglers who looked at us with a mix of curiosity and alarm. Nice day for a jog, Rax puffed, trying to keep up. Just a bunch of humans out for a leisurely sprint. The archives felt like a sanctuary, the familiar scent of dust and old paper welcoming us. We hurried inside, locking the door behind us. Jaxel wasted no time, plugging the device into his computer. Let's hope this works, Jaxel said, fingers flying over the keys. We need to convince them we're not the galactic overlords they think we are, yeah, and maybe we can convince them Earth isn't flat while we're at it, I replied, pacing nervously. The screen lit up with the contents of our stolen data, the words shining against the dark backdrop. Here it is, Jaxel announced. All the fiction they've misunderstood. Rax peered over his shoulder. If this doesn't work, we're going to need some really good excuses. Or a very big spaceship, I added. Because running might be our best option. We worked late into the night, piecing together a presentation that would hopefully clarify humanity's true nature. It was a patchwork of fiction and reality, a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between cultures that misjudged each other. Tomorrow, I said as dawn broke, the first light filtering through the dusty windows. We show them tomorrow, assuming they don't decide to invade first, Rax said, finally sitting down, exhaustion etched into his features. It'll work, Jaxel said with more confidence than I felt. We're smarter than we look, which, let's be honest, isn't saying much, Rax replied, smirking. Let's get some rest, I suggested, stifling a yawn. We've got a big day ahead of us. We settled in, surrounded by the dusty archives and the remnants of our desperate attempt to avert catastrophe. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, we'd find a way to make it work. And if not, we'd at least have one hell of a story to tell. Jaxel, I swear if that thing beeps one more time, I'm going to toss it out the airlock, I muttered, rubbing my temples in a futile attempt to massage away the stress headache that had taken up permanent residence there. The archives were buzzing with an energy that was anything but productive. I could hear the faint hum of machinery, and more annoyingly, the persistent beeping of Jaxel's infernal device. Hey, just be glad it's not ticking. That'd really send up some alarms, Jaxel quipped, his eyes fixed on the flickering screen as he adjusted a few knobs and dials like a mad scientist who'd misplaced his sanity somewhere along the way. Rax, leaning against a dusty shelf with his mug of questionable liquid, whether it was coffee or some alien concoction, I wasn't sure, sighed exaggeratedly. You know, this would be a lot easier if the aliens hadn't decided our little information heist was an act of war. What do they think we're going to do with a bunch of sci-fi books, start a space book club? Maybe they are afraid of spoilers, I replied, keeping an eye on the door. They hadn't come for us yet, but that was a cold comfort. The Alien Council was known for its patience, but also its penchant for blowing things sky high when it finally ran out. Jaxel shook his head. I'd love to see the look on their faces when they find out the big twist in Dune. They'll think we're capable of controlling giant sandworms next. Let's hope they don't dig that deep, I said, for their sake and yours. We've got enough problems without them thinking we're the next interstellar pest control. The atmosphere in the archives was tense, like the moment right before a bar fight when everyone knows something's about to go very wrong but no one's quite sure when the first punch will be thrown. We had to act fast and think faster. All right, Jaxel said, finally turning away from his device. The presentation's ready. Now we just have to convince them to watch it without shooting us first. Piece of cake, Rax chimed in dryly. And if they don't go for it, we'll just have to head for the hills, metaphorically speaking, of course, since this place is flatter than an alien joke. Don't knock their humor, I said. They've got some great material, like believing Star Wars is a documentary. That's comedy gold. We finally gathered our courage and our wits, stepping out into the haze of Temple City. The streets were eerily quiet, a far cry from the usual bustle of alien visitors gawking at what they believed were relics of human conquest. The alien embassy loomed ahead, an imposing structure that now felt less like an edifice of diplomacy and more like a fortress of impending doom. As we approached, a discreet beep on my communicator caught my attention. I pulled it out, glancing at the message with growing apprehension. Well, the good news is they know we're coming, I said, slipping the communicator back into my pocket. The bad news is they know we're coming. Fantastic, Rax said deadpan. I love walking into an ambush first thing in the morning. Really gets the blood pumping. The guards at the entrance eyed us like we were particularly persistent salespeople, their expressions a mixture of disdain and boredom. Clearly, they hadn't expected us to show up voluntarily. One of them, a tall alien with a complexion like storm clouds brewing over a particularly angry sea, stepped forward. State your purpose, he demanded, glancing at us with eyes that could cut through steel. We've got something to show the council, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It concerns the recent misunderstanding. He looked us over, his skepticism practically tangible. Very well. But if this is another attempt to deceive us with your Earth fictions, you will not be leaving again. Noted, Jaxel replied, a hint of bravado in his voice that I knew was mostly for show. But I promise, this one's a real page-turner. We were led through the labyrinthine corridors, the alien's idea of decor apparently involving as much gray and cold lighting as possible. The council chamber was at the heart of the building, a cavernous room filled with alien dignitaries seated in a semicircle. They watched us enter with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for a particularly interesting insect right before it got squashed. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of their gazes pressing down on me like a physical force. Thank you for allowing us this audience, I began, channeling every ounce of courage I had. We're here to clear up some misconceptions. One of the council members, a silver-skinned alien whose head fin twitched with impatience, leaned forward. You admit your deception then? Not exactly, I replied. You see, our historical documents, as you call them, are actually fictional tales. Stories created for entertainment, not instruction manuals for intergalactic warfare. The chamber erupted into a chorus of murmurs, some skeptical, others intrigued. The stormy alien guard from before stepped forward, gesturing for silence. And you have proof of this claim. Jaxel held up the data device like it was the answer to life, the universe, and everything. We've prepared a presentation. It's all in here if you'll allow us to show it to you. The council exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them that felt like it took an eternity. Finally, the silver-skinned alien nodded. "Very well," he said. "Proceed." We set up the device, projecting the images onto the vast screen that dominated the chamber. As the presentation began, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest like a frantic drummer trying to keep up with a runaway beat. The room was silent as the images flickered across the screen, scenes from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a series of increasingly absurd scenarios that I hoped would illustrate the point we were trying to make. The aliens watched with expressions ranging from confusion to what I hoped was amusement. And as you can see, I concluded, these narratives are meant to entertain, to explore hypothetical scenarios that, while imaginative, are not reflections of our reality. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that's more ominous than any noise. The stormy alien guard glanced at the council, his expression unreadable. "Your stories are peculiar," he said finally, "but they do not explain why you attempted to hide this from us." "We weren't hiding anything," I said quickly. "We just didn't realize our fiction would be taken at face value. It's all in good fun, like your holographic chess tournaments." The silver-skinned alien raised an eyebrow. "You jest about serious matters." "Maybe," Jaxel interjected, "but sometimes humor is the best way to bridge gaps. You have to admit, the idea of humans controlling sandworms or blowing up planets with a single weapon is kind of ridiculous." Another wave of murmurs swept through the chamber, and I held my breath, hoping for a miracle. The minutes stretched, each one feeling like an eternity as we awaited their verdict. Finally, the silver-skinned alien tapped his fingers against the armrest of his chair. "Your tales are strange to us but intriguing. You claim they are not true, yet we have seen some parallels with your history." "Parallels, sure," I conceded, "but they are exaggerated. We're not a threat." "We're just complicated. Aren't we all?" Rax muttered under his breath. The council exchanged another series of glances, a silent conversation that felt like it would never end. Then, with a curt nod from the silver-skinned alien, the decision came. "We will discuss this matter further," he said. "For now, you may go." We didn't need to be told twice. We made our way out, the tension in the room dissolving with each step we took away from the council chamber. Once outside, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Well," Jaxel said, a little breathless, "at least they didn't shoot us on sight." "Always a plus," Rax agreed, his usual sarcasm laced with genuine relief. As we walked back through the quiet streets of Temple City, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if we'd really made a difference. Had we convinced them, or just bought ourselves a little more time? Either way, the clock was still ticking, and the outcome was anything but certain. But for now, we'd take whatever small victory we could get. After all, in a galaxy where your mistakes could quite literally blow up in your face, sometimes survival was the best you could hope for. And maybe, just maybe, we'd find a way to bridge the gap between our worlds before it was too late. After our little escapade with the Alien Council, we slinked back through Temple City like a trio of bedraggled cats that had just dodged a pack of particularly ill-tempered dogs. The place was still as quiet as a politician's conscience, the kind of quiet that makes you wish you'd brought a really loud radio just to break the tension. "So," Rax drawled, adjusting his grip on his mug of what now resembled toxic sludge more than any drinkable liquid, "what's our next genius move? Write them a nice letter, maybe." "Dear aliens, thanks for not vaporizing us. Love, the idiots from Earth," Jaxel snorted. "Maybe we can send them a bouquet too. What's the interstellar equivalent of 'we're sorry for the misunderstanding'?" "Probably a nuke," I muttered, scanning the streets for any signs of alien life. "Or at least a really big gun." But I was thinking, what if there's something we've missed? Some part of this city we haven't seen. Like what? "The gift shop," Rax said, eyebrows raised. Or maybe the underground tour where they show you where they keep the bodies. Funny, I said, but it got me thinking. Temple City was ancient, older than any Earth city still standing. Who knew what secrets it held beneath its dusty surface? There might be more to this place than meets the eye. And I'm not talking about their bizarre taste in architecture. Jaxel perked up, as if the idea of hidden treasure, or even just a fresh mystery to unravel, was more appealing than the prospect of another round with the Council. A hidden archive, maybe. Rax chuckled, taking another sip of his questionable beverage. Sure, why not? Let's go treasure hunting. We might find a book titled How Not to Get Blown Up by Aliens. We passed by the archives, now a dreary silhouette against the washed-out sky. It buzzed with the usual energy, but there was something different about it today, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for its own plot twist. I led us deeper into the city, relying on little more than a hunch and the vague idea that maybe, just maybe, we were about to stumble upon something important. Rax and Jaxel followed, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets like a countdown. We finally stopped in front of an unassuming door, half hidden by the shadows of larger, more grandiose buildings. It was smaller than the others, almost like someone had forgotten to build it up to the city's lofty standards. It looked like a supply closet, the kind of place you'd expect to find old mops and forgotten grievances, not secrets of cosmic significance. Well, Jaxel said, if I were a secret archive, I'd definitely hide here. No one suspects the broom cupboard. Rax leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. I dunno. I've met some pretty shifty brooms in my time. Ignoring their banter, I pushed the door open. It swung inwards with a creak that could have woken the dead, assuming the dead around here hadn't already been awakened by our earlier antics. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten memories. The room was packed with shelves, each crammed with ancient tomes and devices that looked like they'd seen better centuries. Welcome to the tomb of the unknown librarian, Jaxel quipped, running a finger across one of the shelves and inspecting the grime. I think this dust predates humanity. As we moved further in, the room seemed to expand, like a magician's trick. The shelves went on, disappearing into the gloom, filled with more books than any sane person would know what to do with. Okay, Rax said, a bit more subdued now. Maybe we've stumbled onto something, or at least a really strange idea for a tourist attraction. I pulled a book off the shelf, flipping through its pages. The text was incomprehensible, a jumble of alien symbols that might have been meaningful to someone somewhere, but to me just looked like a futuristic take on mindless doodles. None of this makes sense, I said, closing the book with a thump. We need something that can help us communicate, something that can translate. Whatever this is. Jaxel was already rummaging through the devices, picking up each one with the care of a kid exploring a candy store. Maybe one of these gadgets can do the trick. They've got to have a translating device somewhere, right? Rax was busy poking around one of the corners, his curiosity piqued despite himself. Or maybe they've got some hidden cameras set up, waiting to catch us off guard. Here's hoping they're not hoping for an encore. Let's just find something useful, I said, exasperation wrestling with determination in my voice. Before they decide we're more trouble than we're worth. As we continued our search, it became clear that this place was more than just a dusty repository of forgotten lore. It was a window into the aliens themselves, a glimpse into a species that seemed as lost in the cosmos as we were. I found an old terminal, its screen flickering to life with a soft hum. The interface was archaic, but it seemed to react to my touch, displaying a series of menus and options. It was the digital equivalent of stumbling upon a treasure map, minus the X marks the spot. Hey, I called out, attracting Jaxel's attention. I think I found something. He hurried over, eyes alight with excitement. What is it? Did you find their collection of embarrassing baby photos? No, I said, rolling my eyes. I think it's some kind of database. It might have what we need. Rax joined us, peering over my shoulder. Here's hoping it doesn't just give us a virus. The last thing we need is some alien malware screwing with our systems. Ignoring his pessimism, I navigated through the menus, each selection revealing more data than the last. It was a gold mine, a vast archive of knowledge that stretched back further than I could comprehend. But more importantly, it held records of human history as seen through alien eyes. "Look at this," I said, gesturing to the screen. "It's like their version of Wikipedia but with more conspiracy theories." Jaxel grinned. "And as we know, that's saying something. Here were records of our species, chronicled by alien historians with a flair for the dramatic. There were entries on our conflicts, our achievements, even our culture, all seen through a lens that twisted reality into something both familiar and foreign. This could be it," I said, hope creeping into my voice. "If we can show them how they've misunderstood us, maybe we can fix this mess." Rax snorted, though there was a hint of optimism beneath his sarcasm. "Sure, because nothing says diplomatic breakthrough like correcting someone's history homework." But despite his doubts, I felt a glimmer of possibility. This was a chance to clear up the misunderstandings that had brought us to the brink of interstellar conflict. A chance, however slim, to avoid becoming the galaxy's next tragic cautionary tale. "Let's download what we can," Jaxel said, already fiddling with his device. "We'll need to present this to the council, show them that truth is stranger than fiction." Rax straightened, his usual humor tempered with something approaching sincerity. "All right, let's do it. And if they still want to shoot us, well, at least we'll have tried." I nodded, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on me like a starship's gravity. "Let's hope they are in a listening mood." We worked quickly, transferring files and images onto Jaxel's device. Each document felt like a piece of a puzzle, a complex web of misunderstandings and assumptions that had led us to this point. But whether we could untangle it in time was another matter entirely. As we finished, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something monumental. A revelation that could change everything or nothing at all. "Ready?" I asked, glancing at my companions. "Ready as we'll ever be," Rax replied, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Jaxel pocketed the device, a determined glint in his eye. "Let's show them what we've got. We left the hidden archive behind, its secrets now a part of our own story." The city loomed around us, its quiet presence both a comfort and a reminder of the task that lay ahead. We made our way back to the embassy, our path clear but fraught with uncertainty. As we approached, the same guards watched our advance with a mixture of anticipation and wariness, their earlier skepticism now tinged with curiosity. "Back so soon?" the stormy alien guard asked, his tone a blend of surprise and caution. "We've got something new to share," I said, trying to project confidence despite the butterflies waging war in my stomach. "Something that might clear up this whole mess." He regarded us with a long, considering look, as if weighing the merits of letting us pass versus the hassle of cleaning up the aftermath of our potential failure. "Very well," he said, stepping aside. "The council is still in session. You may present your findings." We were ushered once more into the council chamber, the dry tension from before replaced with an undercurrent of curiosity. The dignitaries watched us enter, their expressions a mix of skepticism and guarded intrigue. The silver-skinned alien leaned forward, his head fin twitching with interest. "You return with new information." "We do," I replied, gesturing for Jaxel to step forward. "Something that might help you understand us, and why we're not the threat you think we are." Jaxel activated the device, projecting images and documents onto the screen. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the data unfolding before them. "This," Jaxel explained, "is your own history of us as recorded by your scholars. It's filled with observations and conclusions that, while fascinating, aren't entirely accurate." The silver-skinned alien studied the images, his expression unreadable. "What are you suggesting?" "That may be," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Your understanding of us is a bit like believing Star Wars is a documentary, a tale with elements of truth, but ultimately fictional. The room was quiet as the council absorbed this. A few members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from contemplative to confounded. "And what do you propose we do with this information?" the silver-skinned alien asked, his voice thoughtful. "Review it," Jaxel urged. "See where the misunderstandings lie. We can help clarify, explain, and maybe even learn something ourselves. This isn't just about us, it's about finding common ground." The council members whispered among themselves, their conversation a low murmur that seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, the silver-skinned alien nodded, a decision reached. "We will consider this. In the meantime, you are free to remain in the city." We exhaled a collective sigh of relief, the weight of imminent danger lifting ever so slightly. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start, a thread of hope in an otherwise tangled web. As we left the chamber, Rax clapped me on the back, his usual sarcasm tempered with genuine appreciation. "Well, that wasn't a complete disaster." "Not yet anyway," Jaxel agreed, though there was a hint of optimism in his tone. In the quiet aftermath, I allowed myself a small smile. We weren't out of the woods yet, but maybe, just maybe, we were on the right path. After all, in a universe as vast and unpredictable as this one, sometimes all you needed was a little perspective, and a lot of luck. We trudged back through the winding corridors of Temple City, the secrets we carried feeling as heavy as the chip on Rax's shoulder. The city around us seemed to leer with ancient curiosity, as if waiting for us to either save it or doom it with our human ineptitude. "Think they'll actually listen this time?" Rax asked, his mug of questionable liquid still sloshing around as if it were some kind of talisman. "Only if they are as masochistic as I suspect," Jaxel replied. He was fiddling with the device in his pocket, its persistent beeping now a constant companion. It was as if the infernal thing had a personality of its own and was demanding our attention like a toddler hellbent on chaos. "Well, if they don't, we can always try interpretive dance," I said, sarcasm oozing like oil spill. "Nothing says please don't vaporize us like a good cha-cha," Jaxel snorted. "That might just work." Nothing confuses aliens like humans doing something inexplicable. Arriving at the embassy, our merry band was greeted once more by the stormy-faced alien guard. He looked as if someone had explained the plot of a soap opera to him, and he was still processing the absurdity. "Back again. You lot must have a death wish." "Just a wish to clear up a monumental screw-up," I said, plastering on a smile that felt as fake as a politician's promise. He motioned for us to go ahead, clearly resigned to whatever insanity we were about to unleash. "Good luck. You'll need it." Inside the council chamber, the air was thick with expectation, like the calm before a cosmic storm. The dignitaries sat arranged like a jury ready to weigh our fates. They weren't exactly salivating at the prospect, but there was a glint in their eyes that suggested they were eager to see how deep we'd dig our own graves. Ambassador Xylox, with his trademark air of superiority, inclined his head slightly, a gesture that could mean interest, boredom, or indigestion. "You've returned. I presume you have something significant to present." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We've got something that might help. It involves a little thing we humans like to call the truth." I gestured for Jaxel to do his thing. With a flourish that would make a magician jealous, Jaxel projected the data onto the screen. The archives unfolded like a reluctant pop-up book, each page revealing more about our misrepresented history. "This," Jaxel began, pointing with the flourish of a man who knew the value of drama, "is how you've seen us. Fascinating, sure, but a tad off the mark." Rax chimed in, unable to resist. "Like thinking glow sticks are weapons." Amusing, but also a wee bit terrifying if you're the one holding the glow sticks. The council members exchanged glances, whispers rippling through the room like a bad case of galactic gossip. Xylox studied the images, his expression more unreadable than a tax return. "So, you claim our records of human history are inaccurate?" Xylox asked, his voice smoother than a snake oil salesman's pitch. Yes, I said, keeping my tone even. And here's why. We walked them through the misunderstandings, highlighting the bits where fiction had been confused with fact, where a good yarn had been mistaken for a strategic playbook. Every revelation was met with a mix of disbelief and dawning realization. You see, Star Wars isn't real, I explained patiently, as if telling a child their imaginary friend was just that, imaginary. It's a story, a bit of fun we humans like to indulge in. Xylox's head fin twitched in what might have been amusement. And the Empire, also fiction, I assured him. Though, if it makes you feel any better, we do argue about hand shot first like it's the most crucial historical event since sliced bread. Laughter rippled through the chamber, tentative at first, like a sneeze you're not sure will actually happen. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The silver-skinned alien leaned back, contemplative. You propose we accept this? Clarification of history. Yes, Jaxel said, his voice filled with sincerity that was almost alarming coming from him. Understanding each other better can help prevent unnecessary conflict. Plus, Rax added, unable to resist the last word, it's always good to know you've been waging war on glow sticks. The council mulled this over, their deliberations a low hum like an old engine struggling to start. We watched, hearts pounding, each second stretching into eternity. This was it, the moment that would either save or condemn us. Finally, Xylox nodded, his decision made. We will review this information. If your claims hold, we may have been hasty in our assumptions. It was as close to an apology as we could expect, and I was too relieved to care about the lack of pomp and circumstance. And in the meantime, I asked, holding my breath for his answer. You may remain in Temple City, Xylox said. We've no interest in escalating hostilities if they can be avoided. With that, we were dismissed, the council returning to their discussions. As we exited the chamber, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. We'd done it, or at least, we'd taken the first step toward doing it. The galaxy might not implode today, and that was something. Not bad, Rax said, slapping me on the back harder than was strictly necessary. I'd say we made a damn good case for not being blown to bits. Yeah, Jaxel agreed, though there was a hint of exhaustion in his voice. Let's hope they actually follow through. As we made our way back to our quarters, the reality of our situation settled over us like a cold, damp fog. We hadn't saved the world yet, or the universe for that matter, but we'd bought ourselves some time. Think they'll find any other historical inaccuracies? Like I dunno, mistaking Jaws for a nature documentary, Rax mused, his sarcasm a comforting constant amidst the chaos. Let's hope not, I said. One cinematic misunderstanding at a time, please. As we reached our quarters, the city outside continued its serene existence, the ancient architecture standing as a silent testament to the passage of time. And though the task ahead was daunting, there was a sliver of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could bridge the gap between our peoples and prevent a war born of fiction. After all, in a universe where reality was often stranger than fiction, anything was possible, even peace. As we settled in, Rax raised his mug, a toast of sorts to the chaos we'd come to embrace as our normal. Here's to not being actual idiots, for once, Jaxel chuckled, raising his own imaginary glass, and to hoping our luck holds. I raised my own hand in mock salute, the smile on my face genuine despite the lingering tension. To the improbable, the impossible, and the downright insane. With that, we leaned back, letting the moment wash over us. Tomorrow could bring disaster, success, or just another day of alien misunderstandings. But for now, we'd take what we could get. After all, in a universe filled with so much uncertainty, moments like these were worth their weight in gold, or at least in glow sticks. And so we waited, holding onto our small victory like a lifeline in the vast, unpredictable sea of space. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and for now, that was enough. In the aftermath of our little dog-and-pony show to the Alien Council, relations between humans and aliens were being cautiously rebuilt, like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle while blindfolded and half-drunk. The Temple City, once a mystery wrapped in an enigma and topped with a side of confusion, was gradually becoming a beacon of mutual understanding. Or, at the very least, it wasn't in imminent danger of being vaporized, which was a step in the right direction. The air in the city had changed, though not by much. The same ancient curiosity remained, but now it felt more like an eccentric neighbor peering through the blinds rather than an overt threat. It seemed the council had actually taken our words to heart, or at least decided that maybe, just maybe, we weren't entirely full of shit. Rax Jaxel and I sat in what passed for a calf in this alien city, nursing some more of that questionable liquid Rax seemed to swear by. He raised his mug, giving me a sly grin. So, we're not dead. That's new. Yeah, and here I thought signing up for an information heist was a one-way ticket to oblivion, Jaxel chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Guess we're just extra lucky. Or extra annoying, I suggested, taking a sip and grimacing at the taste. Both seemed to work in our favor. The calf bustled with activity, although bustled might be overstating it. A few aliens gave us the side-eye, clearly unsure whether to thank us or run for the hills. The general consensus seemed to lean towards cautiously ignoring us, which was pretty much the standard human experience in alien company. You think they'll really listen? Rax asked, propping his feet up on the table like he owned the place. Jaxel shrugged, fiddling with his ever-present beeping device. If they don't, we can always introduce them to the wonders of human cuisine. That should at least keep them busy. Or in the bathroom, I added, earning a chuckle from Rax. The truth was, we were on the brink of something potentially incredible, coexistence. It was a word that usually made most humans roll their eyes and groan about how it sounded like a hippie commune, but here, in the shadow of what could have been a catastrophic misunderstanding, it was starting to look like a good idea. Later that day, we found ourselves back in the archives, a veritable maze of dusty shelves and outdated holodisks. You could practically smell the neglect, and it was only marginally better than the drink Rax had been nursing. Feels like we're in a museum for obsolete ideas, Jaxel said, glancing around at the organized chaos. You think they'll ever get it? That fiction's just fiction, I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they'll just decide we're too entertaining to annihilate. Either way, it's a win. Rax picked up a random holodisk, blowing off a thick layer of dust that suggested it hadn't been touched since the dawn of time. Look at this, he said, squinting at the label. Gone with the Wind, you think they'll mistake this for a weather report? With our luck, I said, snorting. Probably. But hey, maybe we'll get a front row seat to the alien adaptation. The archives were strangely comforting in their chaos. It was like being surrounded by the collective dreams and nightmares of humanity, all bound up in neat little rows. We might be imperfect, flawed, and occasionally idiotic, but damn, we could tell a good story. You know, Rax said, leaning back against a shelf, for all our faults, humans are pretty adaptable. Jaxel raised an eyebrow. Adaptable, that's one way to spin constantly screwing up but somehow surviving. Call it what you want, I said, but it's the reason we're still here, sitting in an alien city, drinking their horrible booze. Fair point, Rax conceded. Adaptability our superpower. That and a healthy disregard for common sense. The archives buzzed with a low hum of energy, a constant reminder of impending disaster mixed with the promise of hope. The aliens might not have understood us completely, but they were starting to try, and that was more than we could have asked for. Outside, Temple City continued its eternal vigil, its ancient walls a silent testament to the passage of time. It was a strange, surreal place, where reality and fiction blurred like watercolors in the rain. But it was also a place where we could make a difference, however small. As the sun, or whatever passed for it in this alien world, began to set, casting long shadows across the city, we sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. It was a rare moment of peace, a lull in the chaos that had become our lives. You think we'll ever get back home? Jaxel asked, breaking the silence with a question I'd been avoiding. Rax shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe we'll just make a new home here. Well, wherever we end up, let's just hope there's decent coffee, I said, raising my mug in a mock toast. To coffee, Rax agreed, clinking his mug against mine with a grin. And to survival, Jaxel added, his voice tinged with something that almost sounded like hope. We sat there a little longer, watching as the world around us shifted and changed, the boundaries between what was and what could be slowly eroding. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a start. The next day, the aliens called us back to the council chamber, apparently eager to continue the conversation we'd started. The stormy-faced guard was waiting for us at the entrance, his expression as inscrutable as ever. "Here to cause more trouble?" he asked, though there was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Trouble's our middle name," Rax replied with a wink. The council chamber was just as we'd left it, filled with dignitaries and that same electric tension that seemed to follow us everywhere. Ambassador Xylox was seated at the head of the table, his fin twitching in what might have been anticipation or mild irritation. "We've reviewed the information you provided," Xylox began, his voice as smooth as ever, "and it seems we may have been misinformed." "You don't say," I replied, unable to resist the jab. Xylox ignored the sarcasm, continuing with the grace of someone used to dealing with diplomatic faux pas. "In light of these revelations, we're considering revising our approach to human-alien relations." Rax leaned in, always ready with a quip. "So, no more invasions based on our cinematic masterpieces." Xylox's fin twitched again, possibly a sign of amusement. "Correct. We're more interested in fostering a mutual understanding." Jaxel nodded, his beeping device for once silent. "That's good to hear. We'd rather avoid another galactic incident." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of resignation and cautious optimism. It was an odd sight, and one I wasn't sure we'd ever get used to. "So where do we go from here?" I asked, curious about what the future held. Xylox considered this for a moment before replying. "We'll work towards establishing a more formal dialogue between our peoples. Exchange programs, perhaps." "Exchange programs," Rax repeated, a grin spreading across his face. "You mean like sending a bunch of humans to live with you guys and vice versa?" "Precisely," Xylox confirmed. "A chance to learn from one another, to understand and appreciate our differences." "Sounds like a plan," I agreed, though I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before someone managed to screw it up. The meeting ended on a surprisingly positive note, and as we left the chamber, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. We'd come a long way from the brink of interstellar war, and while we weren't out of the woods yet, we were at least heading in the right direction. Back in our quarters, we decompressed from the day's events, the reality of our situation settling in once more. "It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Think we'll ever get used to this?" Jaxel asked, his voice a mix of amusement and disbelief. "Probably not," I admitted. "But then again, what fun is life without a little chaos?" Rax raised his mug in mock salute. "To chaos, then. May it never leave us completely unprepared." We laughed, the sound echoing in the small room, a reminder that despite everything, we were still here, still fighting, still hoping for a better tomorrow. As the city outside settled into its nightly rhythms, I couldn't help but reflect on the resilience of humanity. We were flawed, stubborn, and occasionally downright stupid, but we were also capable of incredible things. We'd faced down aliens, misinformation, and the threat of annihilation, and somehow we'd come out the other side stronger for it. In the end, maybe that was the real lesson of our adventure. It wasn't just about saving ourselves or preventing disaster. It was about adaptability, about learning to cohabit a universe filled with the strange and the unknown. It was about finding common ground in the most unlikely of places. "Think they'll ever understand us completely?" Rax mused, staring out at the alien skyline. "Maybe," Jaxel said. "Or maybe they'll just appreciate the mystery. And as I sat there, surrounded by my friends, by the incredible, insane reality of it all, I realized that maybe, just maybe, that was enough. That even in a universe as vast and unpredictable as ours, there was room for hope, for understanding, for peace. And so we waited, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that whatever it was, we'd face it together. After all, in a universe filled with uncertainty, that was the one thing we could count on.